You are listening to Viewpoints from PlaceCloud. Cultural researchers tell stories of places from around the world. For the full multimedia experience and to support the creators you enjoy, visit placecloud.io.
We're standing just outside Broadgate Circle, next to Liverpool Street Station. In this small passage, you might be surprised, perhaps a little dismayed, to find that 5 gigantic sheets of rusting steel have been haphazardly propped up against one another. Despite the bulk of the metal and the height of the structure, around 55 feet, this arrangement exudes an unnerving frigidity. It only remains standing thanks to an exact balancing of forces of weight and gravity. If someone props their bike up against it for a moment, or a bird perches on it, or there is a strong breeze, everything might come crashing down. This is Fulcrum, a sculpture by American artist Richard Serra, first installed in 1987. Serra is today recognized as one of the most significant artists of his generation, working primarily with Corten steel on vast installations. Don't worry, by the way, about the sculpture falling down. It has been carefully spot-welded, maintaining the illusion while remaining strong enough to withstand even earthquakes. Perhaps Serra was always destined to work with steel. His father was a pipe fitter in a San Francisco shipyard, and Serra often recounts an early childhood memory of watching a ship launch. A moment of tremendous anxiety as the oiler en route rattled, swayed, tipped and bounced into the sea, half submerged, to then raise and lift itself and find its balance. The ship went through a transformation from an enormous, obdurate weight to a buoyant structure, free, afloat, and adrift. It wasn't until the late 60s, however, at about 30 years old, that Serra started work on arranging and transforming steel. This was the era of the post-minimalists. Unlike the early minimalists, who would use simple geometric patterns and shapes to represent ideas, the flight of a bird, or utopian ideals, or universal beauty, post-minimalists focused on the materials themselves, be they steel or glass or neon light. The material only represented itself, and the artists rejected any illusion of the painting or pictorial representation, such as subject on a background. This is more difficult than it sounds. In 1966, for instance, when fellow post-minimalist Carl Andre created his work Lever, a 30-foot row of bricks placed end to end, Andre argued that it was insistently anti-illusionist. No extraneous forces were applied to give the bricks properties that they did not hold individually. Other artists, however, including Serra, argued that the row of bricks receding along the plane of the floor read as a line on a canvas. It returned the artwork to a virtual space of painting, not an actual space of material as material. Richard Serra's great breakthrough, however, was realizing that there is no escape from the background. Not the background of a canvas or the floor, but the background of the institution. The artwork only exists within the dimensions of the art gallery, not just the size of the rooms, the heights of the walls, and the amount of weight the floor can bear, but also the financial systems of dealers and auctions and publicity. Serra's work from then on was geared towards critiquing the relationship between the sculpture and the gallery. In his 1969 work Splashing, he threw molten lead at the edges of the room so that the metal, once cool, would conform to the space. The only way to deinstall the work was to scrape it off and destroy it. In his prop pieces, he would prop sheets of metal up against each other or against the gallery walls. Unlike the closed and portable forms of other artists, Donald Judd and his boxers, Tony Smith and his prisms, Serra's prop pieces were self-evidently temporary, contingent upon the gallery's existence. As soon as the prop pieces are moved, they cease to exist. It was this work which eventually led Serra to his gigantic public artworks, like Fulcrum standing before you, and a similar critique of the relationship between the public artwork and the public space. Richard Serra's uncompromising public sculptures, especially in the 1980s, were often controversial. His 1981 work, Tilted Arc, was a 12-foot-high wall cutting across a plaza in Manhattan, blocking views of ugly office buildings and forcing the movement of the public around it. His supporters praised it for its visceral effect, its active critique of the ideology of the federal buildings around it. His detractors saw it as aggressive and ugly, that it shielded muggers, could serve as a blast wall for terrorist bombs, and exacerbated a rat problem. After an acrimonious debate, the wall was removed in 1989. A similar sculpture in Bochum, the industrial heartland of Germany, was criticised for looking like a clumsy, undifferentiated, half-finished ingot, and that no steelworker could point to it positively with pride. Again, his supporters argued that Serra refused to hide the importance of the steel industry, of all the workers required to install such large works, by transforming the steel into a pretty picture and insisting upon his status as an artist working alone. If the steelworkers were not proud of the most literal version of the output of their work, that was a problem with the industry, with capitalism, not with the sculpture. Fulcrum, the sculpture standing before you, never faced the same kind of controversy. Perhaps because Serra worked more closely with the architects of Broadgate when designing it, perhaps because the critique of the financial district surrounding it is more subsumed, or maybe because Serra was more revered as an artist by the time it was installed. I don't think the overarching post-minimalist project of material as material is in effect here. The propped pieces of metal indulge in illusion, rather than escaping it, maintained by the safety of welding. Perhaps seeing material as just material never works, because we always attach words, stories, and histories to the pure experiences of objects we encounter. The controversies, or Serra watching the ship launch, or even the histories of London shipyards just a few miles from here. On the other hand, perhaps we can still try. William Higginson, writing about Japanese poetry, talks about why haikus don't use metaphors or similes, or even the first-person perspective. He writes, "In the best haiku, the author tries to share the experience itself, so that the reader may share in that experience as directly as possible, and not be limited to the author's response to it." Paradoxically, despite the size, the obstruction, even the aggression of the sculpture, Richard Serra is really trying not to get in our way.